Welcome to this week's Leading with Purpose podcast. This week it's a slightly different, a special podcast actually, because we're going to be featuring E.ON's inclusion report for 2025. It's called Powering Belonging, and it really sets out how the just transition that this business is helping to deliver goes hand in hand actually with a version of E.ON that is there for absolutely everyone. And in fact, we're going to be talking to Becky, Percy and Liz Warbrick, who are both people in E.ON who really power this agenda. But I'm going to start actually with a bit of a quote from Chris Norbury, who's the CEO, because I think he captures it brilliantly in the foreword to this inclusion report. And he talks about how E.ON is showing that fairness at work translates directly into fairness for customers. When colleagues feel empowered, we deliver better services, stronger relationships, and smarter solutions for the energy transition. Belonging drives innovation, trust, and resilience, qualities our sector and our society need now more than ever. I think that's really succinct in showing how these agendas absolutely go hand in hand. So, Becky and Liz, it's brilliant to have you part of the podcast. I'm going to bring both of you in actually just to explain what your roles are and how you work together. We'll start with you, Becky.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. So I'm Becky Percy. I lead diversity and inclusion for E.ON UK. And I always say I'm really thankful for being in this role, because it's a role that really does allow you to make a big difference to people's lives, particularly for our colleagues in E.ON. And I always say our roles are really, really broad. We look at our colleague journeys, we look at colleague experiences, we take colleague insights and data, and we use that to deliver great experiences for our colleagues that allow them to come to work every day and to be their best and do their best and to do a great job for our customers.
Fantastic. And Liz, tell us about your role. Slightly different to Becky's, isn't it?
Yes, so I'm an employer value proposition and inclusion consultant, so EVP and inclusion consultant. Employer value proposition is all the reasons that people come to work beyond getting paid at the end of the day, end of the month. So it's things like learning and development offerings, flexible working, feeling that we're better together, so all around the belonging and inclusion piece, and then supporting Becky with everything that she's just said.
Brilliant. Well, they're both really interesting roles. They really matter. And I guess the first topic really is this point that Chris made, how these issues of the company purpose and this issue of inclusion go together. How do you see them interlinking? Why do they both matter so much? I mean, Chris talks about just transition, but he basically says you can't do it unless you have inclusion as well. How do you see it, perhaps, Becky?
Gosh. So I think there's a lot there, isn't there? So we are a people business, we are a people organisation, and the quality of our service and the products we provide and the service we provide for our customers depends on the people who work for us. So for us, it's all about how can we reflect what we want to do for our customers internally. So if we haven't got people who've got lived experience of our different customers and the communities that we serve, how do we know what they need? How do we know that what are the products that are going to make a real difference for them? So it is, I would say, it's just really integral in terms of everything that we do, that belief and that understanding that it's really important that we reflect those communities. And Chris talks quite a bit as well about it being a really inclusive transition with nobody left behind.
Yeah.
And that is the real importance of having those lived experiences. And it's not enough just to have the people. You have to have the right culture, the right structures, the right support for people around them, so that they're happy to share those things, that they've got trust within the organisation, that they'll be listened to, that will take action on the things that we need to do.
I mean, it's really interesting when you think about the strategic partnership that E.ON has in Coventry, for example, which is all about really looking to see how you can include everyone in the energy transition going forward. You can see how that then becomes essential, that you've got that diversity of employees to be able to help deliver in what is a really diverse community as well. How do you go about making sure that everybody understands this? Because I think there's one thing almost about a leadership person, you know, Chris Norbury, CEO, talking about it. There's another about bringing it alive all the way down the company. And I think this report starts to get into some of the ways you go about doing that. So how do you make it happen?
So I think there's a lot of ways, and I think what's really important is that for us, this is something that we've been working on for a number of years. It's not something that is an initiative that will be over. This is fundamental to our ways of working. What we're talking about is delivering change and transformation over a number of years. So it will take time. And to do that, you do need everybody to be part of it. So part of the work that Liz and I do is to try and create that really collaborative environment so that everybody feels that they are empowered to share their ideas and they have an opportunity to see those ideas put into practice as well. So if I think about a really great example, I think, is the work that we've done on fertility journeys. So it might sound like something that may not be part of inclusion, but when you think about, you've got 1 in 6 people globally who are impacted by fertility. It's a big topic and it's a big thing for us within work. But if you think about the impact it has on people, but that started from a group of colleagues who said, do you know, I've had this experience and I think that there are things that we can do better. And we were really fortunate that we've got our networks, we've got the forum for people to get involved in that way. And then we work really, really collaboratively with that group of people, bring more people in. Listening is really, really important, and understanding those lived experiences. And that has been something that has really helped us to shape a really great package for colleagues going through that.
And do you feel, you know, clearly a big part of this is also the employee networks and the culture. There's a lot of people who, I mean, obviously they're all voluntary, but one of the things in the report is really we dig into those employee networks, how they work, why they work, who's involved. Tell us a little bit about who gets involved in them, but also how they really influence the culture in the business, the innovation that's happening.
Yeah, so we've got 9 inclusion networks across the business. As you say, they are all colleague-led and they represent the voice of the colleague. They think about more than just the HR side of everything, but they do influence policy. They're all sponsored by senior members of the exec or board, and they are influencing leadership to have these conversations at board level about things that matter, to do with inclusive development, to do with fertility policies. A lot of family-friendly policies has come from the networks. The great thing, I think, about our networks is the fact that they all work together. There's a lot of intersectionality, a lot of collaboration across all of them. Recently, for Black History Month, we hosted a panel event which focused on hidden struggles faced by women around neurodivergence, around fertility, around parents. So it was much more than just something that was led by our ethnicity. It was much more than something that was just led by the Ethnicity Inclusion Network.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because wherever we live, you know, whether we're in a street or a village, you know, there's a sense of community. But I think, you know, what you've outlined, Liz, it just underlines that actually work's a community too. And so why wouldn't you want to perhaps, you know, join up with other like-minded people at work, not just outside of work, and that can be a support structure like all of the others that we're used to, you know, in our wider life. And I think they play a really, really important role, and they give people a different dimension, don't they, to being part of E.ON in your case.
Especially across 10,000 employees, we cover all sections of society, all kinds of people, different generations in the workforce at the moment.
Work is such a big part of our lives, and that community is just really important. I think we're slightly disconnected, aren't we, with a bit more hybrid working, and that sense of belonging. Those communities are just such an important part of it. And we have structured them around different underrepresented groups, but also different life stages. And hopefully, as Liz said, they work together. So we'll take a particular topic and we'll work on that together. So something that we're currently starting to look at for next year are things around women's health, for example, and financial well-being, because that's something that impacts across lots of different groups. And those lived experiences will all be slightly different. And the networks and the communities just help to bring that different experience and impact to life a bit better.
And I think what's interesting, I mean, we're incredibly proud to have E.ON part of the Purpose Coalition, but what's interesting is you have other members of the Purpose Coalition who are also looking at this. And so as you look to that future development of those employee networks, actually there's lots of ideas out there, hopefully, that you can draw on from other Purpose Coalition members that can steadily, you know, help you develop it as well, which I think, you know, can only be to the good. One of the things that the report talks about is how this journey on inclusion is a continuous journey. It's not something that, you work on for a few years and then you sort of say, right, we're done. Well done, us. And obviously, E.ON's won awards for all of this work. It was rated, I think, as one of the best places to work if you were between 18 and I think 34. So clearly it's really bringing benefits. But in a sense, how do you make that work literally every day for people who are part of the business? And how do you keep the momentum going over time?
Good question. So in terms of how do we make it every day, I think when I talk about inclusion, sometimes people think it's an HR function. It's not. It's something that can be steered by Liz and I and our team, but it has to be felt by everybody. So the leadership is really important there as well. And having that really engaged leadership group, a hugely supportive board for who this is the organisation we want to be. And we are very values led with our approach to it. I think if you look at, we've done a lot of work around different colleague journeys. So we've done things looking like when you join the organisation, when you build your career, what does your development look like? And that's very, very inclusive and is quite different. So we moved away, as an example, from talent pools 4 years ago. And now you access your development opportunities through our development networks, of which there are 5. And they
Just
have
explain that, Becky. That's interesting.
Yes. Yeah, it is really interesting. So what we were seeing with our talent pools was the diversity within those pools was dropping, and actually we were getting a lot of promotions from outside. So they were great for the people in them, but we have this belief as part of our employee value proposition that everybody should have the opportunity to grow their skills and to have that development. And it was a really key part of that, was moving from a closed talent pool to development networks where you can look at particular skills, so digital skills as an example, engineering and technical, or different life stages. So for example, we've got Fast Forward, which is a women's development network, and they really, really focus on what are the barriers that these people are facing, either gaining these skills or developing their career. And we make those resources available to everybody. We've also developed different development interventions with the various networks. For Fast Forward, for example, we run a program called Women in Leadership, which we've now taken over 400 women through. Yeah, it's incredible. And now that is run by members of the Fast Forward network. So it is the community paying it forward. And I think that's what we see a lot, isn't it? Is that once people are involved and they've gone through a bit of a journey themselves and they've felt the difference it makes, people really want to pay it forward and make a difference for other people. And we've had really great results in terms of women's careers, like promotion rates are now equitable to men, when before they were a fifth. Brilliant. If you look 5 years ago. So really, really great, and is now getting to the place where that is self-sustained by the women who have gone through it and want to pay it forwards for others.
And it makes a huge amount of sense, doesn't it? And, in a way, you've got lots of lessons actually that you can share with other people about how it becomes a virtuous circle, because you have this more fluid approach on talent development that links back to those employee inclusion networks. That then means more people get more opportunities, but also you get more role models, don't you, I suppose? Yeah. And more people, as you were saying, Becky, that then want to play their role in helping the next generation up. And in a sense, I suppose I can relate to that, because I'm from a very working class background. I know what opportunity has done to transform my life. And that's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about all my social mobility work, because I think if I can help take some of my learning, some of my experience, also some of the challenges, and then help find solutions to them, then that's going to help the next generation. And I guess it's probably a good time to sort of almost do that bit of reflection for E.ON. You have, as you've been talking about, you've been at this for a while. It's really genuinely paying dividends already. Clearly some lessons that you've learned as well on the what works. But if you were looking at where you see the challenges, almost those next things that you're like, well, we've done quite a lot here, but there are still some barriers and obstacles. These are where we really need to focus. Where would you point to, do you think?
I think something that we've learned through our Working Families Network is that the flexibility helps everybody. The shared equal parental leave we offer has paid dividends for men and for women, but there is still a lot more informal, flexible arrangements around men. So it's still gender representation, it still looks very much like women are doing the bulk of the parenting and part-time working. So there's work to be done there in breaking down some stigma around men's part-time and flexible working.
This has already touched on, I think, 5 generations in the workplace. So that's going to change, I think, the dynamic. We've done some great work this year, I think, on disability and neurodiversity with a bit of that social mobility lens, but there is absolutely more to do. So our focus this year has been through driving some more engagement with disability and getting people to talk about it a bit more. And I think that's one of our really big learnings, is that if you can get people onto the topic and get them to start talk about it and to talk about it in those safe places, it has a really great impact. So with the work we've done on disability, we've created this experiential event called Off Centre, but we're seeing some really great results. People have really enjoyed it, but then they've gone and done something off the back of it, which is really, really, really important, that they're having those conversations and they're talking about it in their teams, and then they're making the changes and adjustments that people need.
And when we launched your Breaking Down Barriers report recently, I remember we focused in on some of the work to support people with disability and some of the work that you do to help your wider employees literally get experience of what it's like to be visually impaired, to perhaps, have particular health conditions. And I think it's crucial for them getting a perspective of somebody else's version of work, whether that person has multiple sclerosis or anything else. And I think it's really innovative as well. It's not necessarily something most employers would think about doing. But I think the point you made, Liz, was a brilliant one as well around, I think, the fact that actually perhaps there's a bit of a stigma for men thinking they shouldn't really be working part-time, maybe that's not a good look, who knows? But, just almost digging under the surface of, why the fact that I was part of the government that introduced these shared parental leaves, but actually clearly passing the law is one thing, having people actually make the most of those new options is another. And I think for E.ON, starting, as you're saying, Liz, to think your way through, well, how can we really make it work for everyone? This is not just about an inclusion agenda that is everyone apart from men, as some people might sometimes think. Actually, it genuinely does mean for everyone, being able to, fit their work around wider responsibilities. And I guess it's probably a good time to talk about, the fact that it underlines that we all bring our whole selves to work, and if we've got stuff going on outside, then that inevitably sometimes does impact on how we're able to perform at work. So you talked at the beginning, Becky, about some of the work you've done on fertility leave, for example. What are the other things, that E.ON is focused on to really support that wider employee life, if you like, that does matter to people and impact them?
Yeah, I think Liz has touched a little bit on what we do in terms of our family-friendly offer, and that was a really big focus for us a couple of years ago. And I think what we heard off the back of being in lockdown was that people didn't want to lose those things that they had. So we had a lot of men saying, well, do you know what? I still want to do the school run all these mornings. Yeah. And so they should. So it's about how can we create the right conditions for that to happen. We talk about we're committed to gender equality, but when we looked at our family-friendly policies, they were all centred on the woman. And actually that's not right if we are really committed to gender equality. And also it's not inclusive for LGBT plus families either. So we try and take a really broad view of that. And our approach was to we are all part of a family. So how can we help people to support with that? Part of it is flexible working. Part of it was the work that we've done on different fertility journeys. We introduced equal parent leave almost 2 years ago now. And we've had, I think, over 300 dads take that up. And that's something that's been life-changing for those people, that they're able to have that time with their baby, but also to support their partner, to help with the cost of childcare. And there's loads of research, if you look at the wider impacts of having that equal parental leave in terms of mental health for both parents, and even going into like educational attainment for the child. There's positives there. So I think that's some work that we're really proud of. And we were listed in the top 30 family-friendly employers with working families earlier this year. And they've given us some great insights on what we can do next too.
Do you think it's a bit generational as well, Becky, maybe that over time, Liz talked about, this whole issue of making sure that men do take advantage of those opportunities as well. But do you think over time it's just going to become more the norm that basically new parents work out what they want to do? It doesn't matter whether it's a man or woman or both. Actually, people just sort it around what's best for them.
Yeah. I think it's changing. There is definitely that generational element that younger generations, it's an expectation. That there is that support and flexibility and the same opportunities for both parents, regardless of gender.
And I just wonder whether, maybe Liz, you've got your reflections as well on this. COVID was a bit of a tipping point in a way, because you've almost got that generational change. So maybe younger people, there's less stigma, they're growing up in a world where there is shared parental leave and like their friends are, working it out as they start a family. But maybe for those people who are slightly older, the next generation above, as Becky was saying, Liz, maybe COVID just made them take a fresh look at their lives as well. And so for employees and all of your work, that sense of actually this is something we should recognise for an even wider group perhaps of our employees than we might have done 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, I think we saw it a lot during the pandemic when we were all working from home. A lot of people had children bouncing around in the back of their Teams calls, and gender irrelevant, people were parenting all the time, not just outside the hours of school. But yeah, as a wider workforce, I think we've all come to expect that flexibility, freedom to make your job fit around your life, not your life fit around your job. I think that's something that's really important to us here, and I think we do it really, really well. I come into the office most days, but I like that it's my choice across the business. Some people come in twice a week, some people come in every day, but there is a lot more freedom to make your own decisions and make work for you. Is that the way it should be?
Yeah, and I think it's interesting how I think it's really only now we realise just how big a shift COVID was for people's attitudes towards how they work day to day, and it's going to take probably years for it to really settle down. But the companies that will come out of that whole process stronger are the ones that actually allow that process to kind of naturally shake out, but they do it by listening to their employees, putting in place really strong culture and process, and working with people to understand how to make sure they can be at their best in that more flexible culture. And I guess, looking ahead, there's so much obviously E.ON has already done. And I'd encourage anybody listening to this or watching this podcast to look at this report, because it's from a business that is literally changing all of our lives in terms of energy and how we consume energy. But actually, to do that, it's changing itself and becoming ever more open to more people. So where do you go next? What are the new frontiers, the new areas that you're thinking of, whether it's what's happening in the energy sector or, as we've just been talking about, like expectations of employees? How can E.ON stay ahead of the curve? Because it's changing on almost every level, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And it's really exciting, isn't it? I think, as you talked about, COVID fundamentally changed the way we work and our working lives, and there's more to come, isn't there? So how do we respond to those things in a way that stays true to our values and make sure that we are being inclusive and everybody has the opportunities that they want to develop and to build their careers? One big area that we've started to look at and doing some work on this year is around neurodiversity. So again, we were hearing from colleagues particularly how things were difficult for them, even things like having to get to work at a certain time that overwhelms sometimes from the sensory perspective with the offices. So that's something we're really looking at the moment, and we've started some work with an organisation called Genius Within to upskill colleagues and line managers. And I think that's something that has has the opportunity to make some big changes again for those people, but much more broader than that, because it's again to the points we talked about earlier. The more you start to talk about these topics and people understand, and there's that level of empathy, it's that I think that makes a big difference. I think we've been on this journey for a long time, and consistency is really important. So staying true to that. There's more that we need to do in terms of supporting our ethnically diverse colleagues, getting them into more senior roles. We know that should be a focus area for us. We're doing really well. We're above our targets for our senior exec representation, which is currently 18%. But we know we need to build that pipeline of people internally too. And then part of it is having a bit of agility so you can respond to things when things happen, and what's happening in society and what impact is that going to have for our colleagues.
And I guess just being a bit nimble. I think final question I had, in a sense, for both of you was just some personal reflections. Whether there's been that moment when you've been working, with E.ON on inclusion, that something's happened that has really kind of brought it to life for you. It might be, whether it's something you've done or perhaps a colleague that suddenly said, well, this is me. Any kind of anecdotes to sort of finish us off, both of you?
Can I just add as well to what Becky was just saying about neurodivergence?
Yeah, of course.
I think the pandemic taught a lot of people a lot about themselves and the way that they work cognitively. I think a lot more people came back to the office and realised how overwhelming they found it, realised things about themselves that they hadn't necessarily before. So the work that we're doing, neurodivergence and genius within, is really important in that sense, because even if you've not got a diagnosed condition, you can still recognise where these tools and techniques can help you. And then in terms of reflections, I was involved in the delivery of the Off Centre, which Becky touched on earlier, which the experiential disability pop-up that we put together.
Explain that to people, Liz, because it is brilliant.
Yes. So the Off Centre centres around a film where we've got 3 of our colleagues sharing their own stories about what it's like to be disabled and work at E.ON. It's approximately a 15-minute film. Then we have a conversation around the table, and then there are some experiential elements. So we've got goggles that mimic different visual conditions. We've got sort of a video that gives you an idea of what it's like to experience sensory overwhelm, weighted vests that give you an impression of just general fatigue and feeling tired when you've not done anything yet. There's an explanation of the spoon theory, which is a metaphor for energy used by a lot of people with chronic conditions. Oh, there's lots of things. But what we've done with the Off Centre is we've focused on symptoms, not conditions, because while your manager might not understand your condition and might not ever understand your condition, we don't expect them to, they're not a doctor. They can understand these symptoms, and the Off Centre helps people to get a clearer picture of what those things are like. And then we can, across those symptoms, we can speak to a range of conditions and bring that insight to everyone so that they are better equipped to understand their people and help them to manage those things day to day. And the other thing about the Off Centre is the hook. It's the start of the conversation, but there is a lot more to do, and it's certainly in itself is not the solution, but it's opened the conversation. Anecdotally, I know that a lot more people seem to be reporting that they're disabled when they're applying for new roles. More people are telling their managers about adjustments that they need. Conversations are starting, so it's had a really, really positive impact.
Brilliant. Well done, and congratulations on it. It's a simple but really powerful idea, and I think, as much as anything, well, I think 2 things. One, I think it does help people understand, and it gives them the opportunity to understand. If people don't have access to that, then maybe it is going to be hard for them to do it. I also think it's probably really empowering and liberating for people who face those disabilities to at least know that, people around them in their team have a better sense of what it's like. That must be a real relief as much as anything else.
I think it's really important to say that this was led by the Disability Network. It's disabled people putting their own experience to it. It's not an HR initiative, and it didn't come from people who aren't disabled. It has considered those people along the journey the whole time.
Brilliant. And Becky, how about you? Personal anecdote or moment that you think brought things home?
I get the thing for me is when I talk to people when they've gone through something afterwards, and we've done something at some point to help them, and then they talk about the difference that it's made to their lives. So one example is I had a call with somebody a couple of weeks ago who had been through Women in Leadership, and she was really keen that we do something on a new topic. And she'd shared her really deeply personal story with me. I'd not met her before, but what she said to me was, going through Women in Leadership, having that group of women around her and feeling that connection with the community changed her life. So it made her think about herself differently. It made her think about what she could do. She felt that she could have a career. She could go and do some more stuff that she just didn't feel that she was in a place where she could before. She said to me, it really has transformed how I think about myself and how I think about work. And it's changed my ambition, and I want to do something to help people with this. But she's not the only woman, and she's not the only person that has said those things. And I think that's the thing that makes it all really, really worthwhile, is when somebody does share a similar experience. I think when I think about Embrace Your Talent, which is something, a similar program that we do for our ethnically diverse colleagues, there was one woman who went on that, and I had a really similar conversation with her, and she said to me, I really feel like E.ON is invested in me and wants me to do my best.
It's really inspiring, and I'm so pleased that there's this Powering Belonging report. I think the whole business should be really proud of it, actually, because of the impact it has on people, and also the ability it's giving E.ON to be better for customers, crucially, and all of the rest of us. So Becky, Percy, Liz, Warbrick, thanks so much for doing the podcast today. I think it's been absolutely brilliant. I hope people will read this report. I think it's got lots of great stuff in it. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.